All right, it looks like everybody has made it out of our waiting room. So I think we will go ahead and get started. Welcome again to today's webinar, which we've entitled Work-Based Learning, Connecting Educators and Students with Industry Partners. Very happy to have you all joining us here today. I will introduce myself and my colleague, Anna Bradley. I'm Josh Mitchell. I'm Vice President of Academic Partnerships at Riipen, and Anna Bradley Schoenfeld, who you're going to hear from very shortly, works with me on the academic partnerships team as well. We work with institutions that are looking to incorporate more experiential learning, looking for solutions and strategies to do that, help them to understand how they can leverage the Riipen platform, and then transition them over to our team to help them be successful. Here's the agenda we have for you today. We're going to start, we've just done introductions, but we're going to start sort of at the top by talking about some industry trends and where work-based learning fits into some of the data that we're seeing coming out of higher ed here in 2025. Then going to talk about the Riipen solution at a high level and how we address some of those trends and challenges that that I'll go through in the industry trend section here. I'm going to give you some examples of different ways that Riipen partners are using Riipen and some of the outcomes that we see there as well. Then I'm going to transition it over to Anna Bradley, who is going to give a high-level overview of Riipen, actually get into the platform and show you how it works, bring it to life for us. And we'll leave plenty of time then after that for your questions. So we'll have at least probably about 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. I will say you're welcome to put questions into the Q&A at any point today as you have them. Use the Q&A feature in Zoom rather than the chat. The chat, I think we have disabled anyway, but we also will not be closely monitoring that. So as you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A, and we will get to those at the end. All right, so we're actually going to start with a quick poll. The question here is, what are you most interested in learning today? What are you hoping to take away from today's session? So go ahead for about a minute here and feel free to answer this poll question. And this will just kind of level set us on where everybody is entering today's session and what they're hoping to get out of it. So we'll give you another half a minute here to go ahead and answer this poll if you've not already. Let's give it about 10 more seconds, and then we will go ahead and close it out and see the results. All right, I think that's probably enough time. Why don't we go ahead and close that out, and we'll share the results here on the screen. All right, excellent. Well, this is actually the exact order of operations for our session here today. How about that? So we're going to start with some of these trends and some of the data related to where work-based and experiential learning fit. So that is nearly half of you what you are most interested to see. Then we're going to go right into showing you some different examples of what our partners are doing. We'll do that both at a high level, but also you'll see some as we get into the demo and some interest here in the outcomes and impact as well. So we've got some good data there. All right, that's perfect. We'll go ahead and close that out, and we will get right into our meet here today. So just to start out with sort of high level, who we are at Riipen, what is our mission, what is our vision? Riipen began about 10 years ago. We're actually a Canadian organization, and our co-founders were in college at the time and were participating in co-ops, but saw that access to those kinds of very high impact practices were not available to everyone. And so they really looked at the challenge being, how do you get experience without a job, but how do you get a job without experience? And what are different ways to be able to accomplish getting experience and use that to be able to leverage a job. And that's where the idea for flexible and innovative approaches to that, project-based, and how do we scale and help our partners to be able to grow those experiences. That's where that came from. And so that remains our mission today, is these kinds of high impact practices being a way to eliminate and cut underemployment. That's really what this is all about. And so that's what we're going to focus on here today. And that I started with that because underemployment is something that is well documented as a challenge in higher education. This is some data that now is a little under a year old. This came out last spring from Strata and Burning Glass in their Talent Disrupted report. And really the key findings here are that underemployment is a pervasive problem in higher education, in U.S. higher education. This is all U.S. focused data, where more than half of four-year graduates are underemployed a year after they graduate. So the skills that they learned in their baccalaureate degree were not necessary for the job they were holding. That's really what underemployment means. And the larger problem is not only that they begin their career underemployed, but this data finds that if you begin your career underemployed, you have a very high likelihood, 73% of those that were underemployed after in their first job remained underemployed 10 years later. So solving this underemployment problem is a really key challenge for higher education today, as this data demonstrates. Just a little bit of additional nuance related to this data from Strata and Burning Glass. This is not surprising by any stretch, but underemployment is a larger problem for students who go to a more inclusive as opposed to a more selective school. And it is also a larger problem for students that may come from low-income backgrounds. So those who go to more inclusive schools that may come from a lower socioeconomic background have even higher rates of underemployment. And again, those persist 10 years later. So really, I think what that represents is the value of higher education and helping to advance your own employment and earnings potential is held back when someone is underemployed after they finish and their undergraduate studies and start their career. A little bit of additional data that I think rounds this out. One of the key recommendations from that Talent Disrupted report was that we need to provide more internship opportunities. Internships being a key way to ensure that someone is not underemployed after they graduate. The challenge with that is that access to internships is also uneven. There are major gaps in access to internships. So this is some data that just came out this past fall from the Business Higher Education Forum. This was specifically looking at internships, and you can see the massive gap here in those who reported wanting an internship versus those that were able to secure one. They did some additional analysis on what is considered a quality internship. Won't get into the details of that today, but you can see we can share the links to these things in the chat, by the way, if you're interested in these reports and digging more into that. But a very large gap in terms of access to internships as opposed to those who want them and need them to ensure that they are not underemployed when they finish their studies. And again, a little bit more nuance to that particular data set. Same sort of theme. There are disparities in access to internships based on race, based on income level, those kinds of things here as well. So that is where then I think the Riipen model really fits. Is again, the internships are fantastic. Co-ops, apprenticeships, those kinds of experiential learning opportunities are well documented as providing a strong pathway to a high paying job and a high quality career. But the access to them is uneven. And quite frankly, there are many groups of learners for whom internships are very challenging for them to participate in because of their life circumstances. There are many undergraduates out there that are working to be able to pay their way through school. And so taking a full-time internship is simply unrealistic for certain demographics of learners. So we need different ways to provide experience then, more scalable, more flexible ways to provide experience. And that's really what Riipen, that's really where Riipen fits, is we are focused on project-based opportunities, often embedded into the curriculum. And so those are experiential learning, authentic experiential learning opportunities that are more accessible to a wider array of learners. So to give you a little bit of a sense for the scale of work that we have been doing here at Riipen, I talked about how we've been doing this for going on 10 years. The current platform that you'll see when Anna Bradley does a demo here in a little bit We're in the 2.x version of that, but we've been in market with that for more than 6 years. And in that time now, we've delivered more than 270,000. These are very fresh numbers that we've just recently updated, but more than 270,000 individual student experiences. So you can see from that number alone that we are doing this kind of work at scale, have been for quite some time, have learned a lot about how to do it optimally and help our partners to do that every day. We do that by partnering primarily with educational institutions, colleges and universities, but a lot of other kinds of education providers as well. And so those number into the hundreds in this time that we've been doing this work. A lot of what we do is embedded into the curriculum. And so when we're doing that sort of work, we are working with faculty to help them transform a class that might have a case study as part of it, or might have some kind of hypothetical project, and transform that into a work-based learning class that incorporates a real project or several real projects. So we have partnered with 5 figures. We're into the 5 figures of number of educators that we've partnered with over our years doing this work. And the last number here that I will highlight is really where we started. Our approach to doing this kind of work was one of the primary challenges being supply of projects. If we want faculty to do more of these kinds of curriculum embedded project-based experiences, if we want to deliver more of these flexible kinds of experiences, we simply need to be able to have enough projects to satisfy that demand. And so we started Riipen by really building a very robust two-sided marketplace, where one side of that are companies who are bringing these projects and looking to partner with faculty and with their students. And we've grown that now to more than 44,000 companies, nonprofits, organizations of all different and all different industries and verticals, primarily small and medium sized. The Riipen model is a very good fit as well for those kinds of organizations that may not be large enough to take on an intern, but still want to have an opportunity to work with students. And so doing so in a project-based format, in a virtual format, is a very good fit for them. So we continue to grow that all the time, but that's really where Riipen started, was solving for that. And we'll talk more about how we've now built the platform to be very feature rich, to then support not just the matching, but then oversee the collaborations, collect a lot of robust data as you go. That's really what Riipen is today, is a full system to be able to systematically track, manage, and report on these experiences. But that number, nevertheless, I think is a very impressive one. And finally, you've been able to see some of the logos here on the screen of some of our partners that we are working with, and you'll see some of those as we get into the demo here as well. Just really high level, I just mentioned manage, or match, manage, and report. Those are some of the major buckets of how the Riipen platform works. We have that very robust two-sided marketplace with thousands of projects available at any one time to help our partners find what they need for their learners. We've also built the functionality to be able to support a private marketplace of projects just from your companies, from those in your Rolodex. We know from doing this kind of work now for many years that there are a lot of faculty doing this on their own with contacts that they have within their network, maybe local businesses, but they're not doing it with a system. They're doing it with Google Sheets and email. They're doing their intake via Google Form. So being able to support that, to be able to manage the intake process of those projects out of your existing Rolodex, but do so systematically in a single place, that's what the private marketplace is all about, and that is another major portion of the Riipen offering. Then once those matches are made, once they come from the Riipen marketplace, or if they come out of your private marketplace, giving you a lot of tools to be able to oversee those collaborations, to be able to monitor student progress, keep tabs on the communication that they're having, ultimately grade and assess the work that they've done. That's really what the project management and collaboration features are all about. And then finally, the real value of this work is in being able to demonstrate the impact that it has on student outcomes, on their employability, on their employment. I have some data here. I'll show you some indicative data toward that end, but we have really built the functionality to be able to support collection of the kind of data that's important to you, and then dashboards to be able to visualize that so that you can be measuring the impact of this kind of project-based work with your students. I want to give you just a few high-level examples of the kinds of collaborations that we are supporting here at Riipen. So historically, we do a lot of business, a lot of STEM, computer science, IT, things like capstone courses, or really anything in those kinds of programs where there is a project-based component lend themselves very well to doing a real project with a real company. So we do and have historically done lots of those kinds of things. So I'm going to highlight some of the more novel and innovative programs that we're running today. And one of those is with the Council of Independent Colleges, which are private liberal arts, often small institutions across the U.S. They actually have international members as well, but for the purposes of this consortium, these are just U.S.-based members. This is actually a program that we are now in the second year of. It is funded by Strata and Ascendium, and it really is focused on incorporating work-based learning into programs and courses that are serving students that have fewer opportunities to get experiential learning in their program. The arts and humanities, for example. So a lot of the courses that we are running for these institutions are very, very much non-traditional for Riipen. They're not business, they're not marketing, they're not computer science. And we can show more examples of these for anyone that's interested in follow-up to this. But these are really across the arts and humanities curriculum. We actually did a webinar back in December focused on that very topic. That again, I think we can drop the link to the recording of that in the chat here at some point. If you're interested in that. But that is a really interesting consortia that we're now in the second of third year, 3 years into, and we are collecting a lot of data as part of that with a third-party evaluator to look at the impact and the outcomes of that initiative with these schools and those courses. Another, I think that is an interesting example about how might you use this model of work-based learning comes from the University of California, Riverside, where they have a lot of international students in their extension programs. And international students, as we know, are here on student visas. They cannot take the kinds of paid employment or internship opportunities that other students have. So again, when we talk about access and those that may have barriers to access, international students are one such population. And so Riverside has really incorporated work-based learning into different kinds of courses and programs that are serving high numbers of international students. That is something that they then position in their marketing, that if you come to UC Riverside, you will have the opportunity to get authentic experience that in other kinds of programs you may not have the opportunity to partake in. So theirs is an example of those kinds of underserved populations of learners and the approach that they've taken. And the last one here that I'll highlight quickly is an area that we're really seeing some growth in, and that is, again, we do a lot of work where we're embedding these kinds of project-based experiences into the curriculum, in a class that's already part of a program, into a capstone, something that students are taking for credit, and that gives them the opportunity to get experience while they are progressing toward their degree. But we all know that the curricular review process, if you're going to change a program or add a course, that takes a lot of time. Even just taking a class that might have a case study component today and transitioning that to a work-based learning course, that takes an overhaul of the syllabus. So what are other ways to get students these kinds of experiences and still do it for credit? We've seen a lot of growth in this area of project-based internships or academic internships, where this is a 1, 2, or 3 credit course in the catalog, where a learner can complete a project and fulfill an internship requirement to do it. I know there are a lot of institutions now that are adopting experiential learning requirements or internship requirements for incoming undergraduates, and then are still finding that there are gaps that they have to try to solve to make sure that they are accomplishing that. This is one such way to do that, and there are 2 examples here, one from UNC Charlotte, one from the University of Virginia, where we're running these kinds of, helping them facilitate these kinds of project-based internships currently. You can see just in the brief information that's on your screen that these can take different shapes. And you'll see as Anna Bradley does the demo that Riipen is very flexible. It is up to you to determine what kind of project do you want, what is the shape of that in terms of how many hours, how are students going to work on it. On the left, UNC Charlotte's version of this is a 45-hour project where students are working in teams of 3. At 45 hours, that equates to a 1 credit internship course. On the right, at the University of Virginia, it's a 150-hour project that they're doing individually. That one at 150 hours is in the catalog as a 3-credit internship class. Both of these, I will add, are facilitated by their career centers. So that's another really interesting element of this is the collaboration in these cases and others between the career center and the academic side to try to look at populations of learners that need experience and find a creative solution for it. That, I think, is what these represent. And so this is an area of real growth that we see here at Riipen. And I'm going to wrap by showing you just some indicative data then for what are the kinds of outcomes that we have observed when we're doing this kind of work. All of this data that I'm actually going to show you is from one of our large funded Canadian projects that we do called Level Up. And really the reason that this, I think, is our best data set is we have thousands of students that have gone through this. And so it's a very rich set of data, but also because it's a funded program, we have a very high response rate on these surveys. And so this really rich data, I think, is indicative, therefore, of what you might be able to collect. And you're going to see briefly, Anna Bradley's going to show you some of the ways that we do that, some of the feedback and survey tools that we have. But without reading this to you, you can see it on the screen. You can see the extent to which these learners are agreeing that these projects have helped prepare them in several ways for the workforce and in terms of being employable. One of the other things that we do in this program and many of the others, some of the examples you'll see today, we do this, and we have a lot of templates to do this, is ask learners a set of questions before they do a project, and then ask them the same or similar questions after they finish the project and be able to measure that delta for how the project experience has helped them in several different ways. And this is an example of several of those measures where we've seen improvement on things like employability, on things like their academic studies being in line with their career aspirations, connected to their career goals, those sorts of things. So again, this is indicative of what we might be able to collect. And then the final thing here is moving beyond employability and really looking at employment. And because we work a lot in the curriculum, we might work in the second or third year of a program where employment is still some ways off. So we're not able to collect that data for all of our academic programs, although many of our customers are looking to be able to collect that more systematically as well. In this particular program, this is something that we're able to ask students. And what you can see here is that 64% of learners that have gone through this program reported either a direct, meaning they got an employment offer from the company they did a project with, or indirect, meaning they leveraged that experience for an offer from a different company. That was the rate that we saw a direct employment outcome. And so this is, I think, again, really indicative of how these kinds of experiences and the tangible feedback, the tangible experience that then goes on a student's resume can be used to help them then move into their career, leveraging the degree that they've just earned so that they're not starting their career underemployed and persisting to be underemployed 10 years later. That's really what it's all about. By the way, we have an impact report with a lot of that kind of data, plus a lot of other data from our different of our partners that we'd be happy to share with folks if you're interested. We'll have the new version of that for 2024 coming out here in the next several months, and we'll be excited to share that as well. All right. I'm going to stop talking here in a moment and pivot it over to my colleague, Anna Bradley, to give you a demo. But before we do that, we're going to launch one more poll. If we can go ahead and launch that out. So this is really now moving into the platform itself. Which features are of particular interest to you as we do this demo. Would love to know what you're most interested to see in the platform. So again, we'll give you about a minute to answer this, and then we'll share out the results and move right into the demo. So again, sort of highlighting the different buckets here, actually finding partners, managing those, overseeing the collaborations, tracking outcomes. Which of those is of most interest to you? We'll give about 10 more seconds. Resisting the urge to count down, but I think that's probably about enough. We can go ahead and wrap that up and share the results, and it's almost all over the board. That's great. So we have we've got a third of respondents want to see how we actually manage these and oversee them. That's great. All of these, though, of high interest here to those of you that have responded. So that's perfect because we're going to show you these features here next. I will preface by saying, we've got about 15, 20 minutes to do this, so you're going to get a good high level. But we're happy, of course, to then follow up and give you a more in-depth demo if you're interested. So with that, I'm going to stop my share. I'm going to introduce my colleague, Anna Bradley Shainfeld, and she is going to share her screen and take you away. Anna Bradley?
Fantastic. Thank you, Josh. And you all should be seeing my screen now. Hopefully we did that seamlessly. Excellent. And it's great to meet all of you. As Josh mentioned, I'm Anna Bradley Shainfeld, and I work with our academic partners at the beginning of their relationship with Riipen to really help you decide how this could be a solution for you, how can it help scale experiential learning on your campus, and how to get started. For today's demonstration, as Josh mentioned, I'm going to do a very high level overview. We're going to touch on all of those things that we just pulled you on. So happy to see it's a spread across the board of what everyone is most interested in. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into it. So what we're looking at right now, this is Florida International University's Riipen portal. One of the very first things that we do when we work with an academic institution is we create this portal for you. Think of this as your hub to manage all of your university-wide work-based learning projects, courses, programs, students, faculty, everything you need to do would start from this hub. I'm not going to go over everything here because there's a lot, but I do want to point out the experiences section on the hub, because this is really the meat and potatoes of Riipen. These colorful tiles that you see here are all courses or programs at FIU that are looking to collaborate with industry partners as part of that particular course or program. So you can see here, we've actually got three that are actively about to start, this one in May, this one in March, and then we've got some that are a bit older that happened last semester. So for the purposes of our conversation, I'm going to go ahead and click into this particular course. It's already completed, and so it's going to give you a really good rundown of what this particular faculty member did, how they collaborated with industry, and how they used Riipen to do that in their class. So this is Sabrina. She's an instructor at FIU. She teaches an ad PR course, and getting projects with real world companies was incredibly important for her for this course because she wanted her students to actually create a PR campaign in a real world scenario. And so she was very motivated to work with us and get her students on the platform. And so what we did when we started working with Sabrina is we sat down with her, we looked at her syllabus, and we helped her create this page. This is what we would call a course or experience page. And this page really serves two main functions on Riipen. First, it is your advertisement per se to the industry partners we work with to articulate this is who I am, this is the level of students I'm working with, this is the timeline for the project, and really this is the collaboration I'm looking for. The other thing this page does is if you see these tabs up here, this is where you as an individual instructor or program coordinator would manage these collaborations with your students. So almost think of the full portal as the university hub. This page is your particular hub for your course or program. So I'm going to point out a couple of things on the course page here to really highlight how Riipen helps you to incorporate these real world projects into your course. So to start off, I do want to point out the timeline here. I often get asked, how do you decide who's doing what and when, and how is this going to work? On Riipen, we are what we like to call educator driven. And the timeline here is an example of that. All of the projects and programs on Riipen, the timeline is determined by the educator or program coordinator, and the industry partner has to agree to that timeline for that instructor. That way we're ensuring that we're sticking with the academic calendar. If it's embedded within a course, the project will actually be completed when that course is happening, and it just makes sure that everyone is on the same page. We also can articulate if you have a preference for companies, location type, industry. And then one of the things I wanted to point out here, these small blue tiles here that are highlighting specific skills. We're going to talk about this a little later, but I want to highlight it now as well. We work with Lightcast Skills Taxonomy to pull in these skills that Sabrina was able to attach to her course to demonstrate that students in her course are learning these skills. At the end of the project, students will receive feedback from the employer partners that they worked with, and employers will actually verify whether or not students demonstrated these skills during the project. And that's going to show up a little bit later, but I wanted to highlight that here as well. Of course, we have a detail of the learner profile as well as the scope of the project. And Josh talked a little bit about this in his part of the presentation, but I wanted to point out here, this is a course embedded project, and Sabrina is expecting students to work about 90 hours per student on the project. This is quite typical on Riipen, but I will share, we do see upwards of 150 hours if it's a robust capstone or internship that students are doing. But we also see projects on the lower end that are about 10 hours per learner, especially if it's in an entry-level class, it's a project at the end of the course. It really is dependent on what's most appropriate for the course or the program. What I'm drilling down here is that it is flexible and customizable based on the best use case for you and your students. And then also we can see here, Josh pointed this out in the presentation, you can have your students work in teams or they can complete projects individually, again, based on what's most appropriate for the course or program. Sabrina has also detailed out here outcomes and deliverables that industry partners can expect to receive as a part of working with her students in this course. And she's even taken the time to list out some project examples. Again, she's articulating to the industry side of our platform the type of collaboration she's looking for her students and what they can expect out of a partnership. One of the my favorite aspects of the experience page here are these custom questions. Sabrina has used these to filter out companies that are not going to be a good fit for her based on some of the non-negotiables she has for working with her students. And so if you have what you would maybe call non-negotiables for yourself, you could require companies to answer these questions before they even communicate with you on the platform. That's going to help you weed out the best results to make sure you are matching with the exact right company for your students. So once this gets created, a couple of things happen. First and foremost, this goes live into what we call our experience marketplace. I'm going to pivot to another browser where I'm logged in as an employer to show you the experience marketplace. So here I'm logged in as an employer. I used to run a small candle business, and so I have an employer account. But if I was looking for some help with my candle business, this is where I would come to find educators like Sabrina and her students to request to work with them. On the marketplace, I can search by keyword, category, or location. For our conversation, let's just go ahead and search by a subcategory and we'll do market research. And now all of the current classes on Riipen that are, this one starting in January, this one starting in March, all of the current classes or programs that are adjacent to market research have populated, and me as a business owner can come in and I can click into one of the courses and I can read through whether or not what that educator is looking to do with their students meets the needs of my business. If it's a good match, I can scroll up to the top and click request match, and my request will then be sent directly to that educator, or in our case for our conversation, it would get sent to Sabrina. I'm going to go ahead and click back to Sabrina's course. All of those requests would populate right here in the request tab of Sabrina's course. The other thing that happens is Sabrina can actually be proactive and start to look for projects to meet the needs of her students on her own. And she can do this by going into her project marketplace. This is the Riipen project marketplace. This is the bread and butter of Riipen. When Josh talked about, we spend a lot of time building this marketplace of employers and projects. This is what we are talking about. This is where you will find those 44,000 industry partners. At any given time, we've got about 2,000 to 3,000 projects live, ready to match day one on the platform. So Sabrina can come here. She can search by keyword, subcategory, or location. Let's go ahead and filter this to the US for today. And then we'll go back down to market research and see what populates. So as the educator, I can now scroll through and read some of these headlines of projects to see if any of them pique my interest for my students. And just scrolling through today, you can see there's over 6 pages of projects for market research. So let's go ahead and click into one. And then you can now read through the project to determine whether or not it might be a good fit for you and your students. If it is perfect, wonderful. You can go ahead and click request match. But what we have found on Riipen is oftentimes there's a 80% match where you are looking at a project and you're thinking, yes, this is exactly what I want to do with my students. However, I want to make some changes so that it perfectly aligns with the curriculum and learning objectives for my course or program. This is one of the ways that we are truly educator driven. So if I were to click request match, again, those would populate into the request tab on my page. And Sabrina's course is done. So I'm going to pivot over to a course that is still in the process of matching. We can go ahead and see all of the companies that have reached out to this particular course, and we can click into the request. And we can now see what the project is requesting to do with the educator. So what the industry partner wants to do with the students. And as the educator, you actually have the opportunity to propose changes right here in the platform and make those edits to the project so that it is 100% aligning with your course. So I'm going to go ahead and click this proposed changes button. And you can see here, I could essentially redline the project to make it an exact match for what I'm looking for. I'm going to go ahead and click cancel. I don't want to make any changes to this because it's live. But the other thing I wanted to point out here, this is what we call our matchmaking process. And you saw on this page, there were several pending requests. When you are limited on time, Ripen has what we call a compatibility match score. So if you have 20 program requests and you only have so much time, you can just come straight down here to the compatibility match score, see if it's a good fit. This one happens to be great. Wonderful. You can then go in and spend the time reading through the project to determine if it's a good fit for you and your students, and then click accept the project up here. Again, the thing I'm drilling down here is that it is all customizable based on the educator on Ripen. You are never forced to work with an industry partner. You choose who you like to work with. And you also have a team of folks here at Ripen helping you along the way in this process. So I like to say you've got a team of experts behind you. So while you are sending these requests and looking for businesses to work with, companies are sending you requests to work with you. You also have a Ripen team helping you in this process, helping you as much or as little as you would like. We're here to support you in that relationship. So this is all what we call the kind of the matchmaking experience on Ripen. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to Sabrina's course if I can get there. And again, all of this is managed on Sabrina's hub on Sabrina's course page, which is her hub for managing these projects. I know several of you said you were really interested in looking at some of our project management tools. So I'm going to pivot over to one of our courses at the University of Virginia to really highlight how Ripen helps large programs scale some of this work-based learning that they're doing. So these are tech projects at the University of Virginia, and you can see we're on the participants tab. And so the program coordinator for this program could come here and they could easily see all of these groups of students collaborating on multiple different projects all in one spot and get a really clean snapshot of where their students are in completing the project. So when we're talking about managing multiple companies, multiple students, multiple deadlines and timelines, all of that can be easily tracked and viewed in one place. So we can easily just see from this hub that this group is a little bit behind. So if we were the program coordinator here, we could click in here and we could see where they maybe needed some nudging, where they needed some help to move forward. Let's go ahead and click into one project that's been completed. And we can see on a more granular level where our students are in completing the project. So we can see they've completed several of the milestones that were important to the project. As the program coordinator or educator, you can also see the communication between the students and the industry partner that they're working with. So instead of being on a million carbon copied email chains with student groups, all of your communication is in one place. And you can even see the communication between just the group members as well to ensure that they're working together to move this project forward. We also were talking about impact reporting and feedback earlier in the presentation, and this is where that happens. A couple things to point out here. We have the ability to do assessment and feedback reporting for both students and employers throughout the project. So you can see here, there's a learner self-assessment, there's a midpoint check-in, and there's an endpoint check-in for the students. You can do the same thing with your employer as well. So imagine you have these objectives in your strategic plan. You can customize these assessments based on your strategic plan objectives, and then you can get that data on the back end. And Riipen can help you to organize that data and make sense of that data so that you can make decisions to better improve your student experience, to better improve their employment outcomes based on all this assessment data you're getting. The other type of feedback that students receive is they will receive feedback from the employer at the conclusion of the project. I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment. But again, real-time feedback for students, so they are learning how they can improve, what they did well, and they can then use that in their career search journey. But I did want to show you an example of some of that impact reporting and how we can help at Riipen detail these reports for you. So this is an example of a report out of one of our programs in Canada where you can see they were interested in measuring communication, creativity, critical thinking, etc. And you can see the real-time report data. We can also see employability data as well. We've got some great qualitative quotes from students. And again, this is all based on what you are specifically interested in reporting on as an institution. We take that strategic plan, create these assessments, we get the reports and data on the back end. It can be a really beautiful full circle thing if we can then use that data to make program improvements. Finally, in the time we've got left today, I do want to talk about the learner profile. This is my absolute favorite part of the Riipen system. So every student who does a project on Riipen will get a digital portfolio showcasing the work and the projects they have done with companies as part of their academic journey. And this is Jessica, and this is her profile that I wanted to share today. Jessica can edit this if she wants to. She can make it public, she can make it private, she can also connect it on her LinkedIn. But really exciting here, if we go into feedback and we scroll down, we can see feedback that Jessica has received from the employers that she worked with on the projects that she completed. And so we can see she got 5 out of 5 stars in several of these categories. We also got a great qualitative quote from the employer. But then again, here are those skills I talked about on the experience page. This employer, Andrew, has verified that Jessica completed these skills when she did her project. Again, employer verified skills. This can all now be shared and connected to Jessica's LinkedIn, helping her to articulate the work that she did in academia to the real world and to her job search. We all do this work and we want students to get these fantastic experiences that are rich in project scope and feedback, but having this tool to help students articulate the work that they did to me is remarkable, and it's something that we're really proud to share with our academic partners. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop, leave some time for questions and maybe a bit of discussion, but Josh, take it away. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Senator Bradley. Well, I'll go ahead and just get a placeholder up here on our screen because it's Q&A time. So I've been keeping an eye on the questions here that have been coming in. There are a lot of questions here. I'm going to probably combine and paraphrase some so we can try to answer as much as we can. And I'll probably take the first few and then I may tee you up for one, Anna Bradley, as you get caught up. But I think I'll start with, there were a couple questions going all the way back to some of the data that we presented at the top about underemployment and things of that nature. One of the questions, I'll read this one, most of it is, couldn't these high numbers of underemployed people simply mean that we are overeducating a lot of people who simply don't need a college degree? I'm not going to answer that one directly because I don't think I can. I don't think I can fairly. But I think the point of the underemployment data is to say that if we do have students coming to our institutions, taking out loans, spending thousands of dollars to get an education, then we have some obligation to them to make sure that they can make good on that, and be able to repay their loans, be able to take what they've learned and apply it in a meaningful career. So we'll leave aside the some of the related kinds of things about, are there what is the value of a liberal education, and some of these other things that are pervasive in some of the thought going on today. But at the end of the day, the data is pretty stark that there are very high percentages of students who are not making full use of what they have learned at a high cost in their career. And that simply is a problem I think that we can all agree we have to solve. There was another question going back to the arts and humanities topic when I was talking about our partnership with the Council of Independent Colleges. And this one, I think, relates to that notion of a liberal education, the value of a liberal education, not everything being tied directly to a career option. I won't read this one in full, but it was really asking about, should we be incorporating these kinds of career focused projects early in the curriculum, instead of folks letting folks explore new avenues of thought and things of that nature. I will say, and we don't have, in the interest of time, a lot of time to get into this today, but I think what we've seen in that particular program and others where we have been doing work-based learning in arts and humanities kinds of courses is that a lot of the skills that we're focusing on there are what I would say are generally applicable skills, soft skills, things like problem solving, critical thinking, writing skills, those kinds of things that are not necessarily tied to a direct career, but instead are meant to develop the kinds of skills that are useful in any numbers of careers, and perhaps along the way, in doing in what might be a business project, it does help to provide some career clarity. But it's less about saying, you just went through a marketing program. Now go develop a marketing plan, which is something you're going to then directly turn around and do in your employment, and more so in rounding out some of those soft skills that are very important in the workplace that might be more difficult to try to develop in typical programs. So that was sort of high level, but I did want to address that one because I thought it was quite interesting. Let's see. There are several questions here about the employer side, and maybe Anna Bradley, this is one that I can pitch over to you. I'll frame the question and then pitch it over to you to answer. And I think the nature of the questions are basically, how do we get companies on Riipen? How do we ensure that we have, a wide variety of different industries? And basically, at the end of the day, enough employers and enough projects to fit the demand that our academic partners have. So, Anna Bradley, do you want to talk a little bit about what that goes into that? And there was another question about timing, how long it takes, and I think that's a related question that you can answer as you do so.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Josh. So we are very much a just-in-time marketplace on Ripen, and our job is to fill and almost overfill our employer marketplace with projects to meet the needs of our academic partners. I had said several times we're academic driven, and that's actually where our projects and partners come from. So when we start working with an academic institution, let's take FIU, for example, since that's one that I shared. What we do is we sit down with them to really learn what type of employer profile is going to be important for them when working on Ripen. What makes the most sense for them based on the courses and experience they're running. We then, if we don't already have those projects in place, we do targeted campaigns to get those employers onto the platform specifically to work with FIU. So if they were most interested in working with companies in Florida, we have a whole team, just like Josh and I are on our academic team talking to you all. We have a whole team on our employer side doing the same thing with employers to bring them onto the platform to work with our academic partners that we have. In terms of the matching and how long it takes, it really depends on the subject area, to be quite honest with you. Josh mentioned at the beginning of our conversation today that Ripen has a deep history in working in business and technology. those projects are readily available on the platform in excess. But if we're working with a more niche program, it could take us a little bit longer to get you a great match. And by a little bit longer, I'm typically saying about 6 weeks to do that. It really depends on the type of project you're looking for. But that's what we do. Our match rate, our successful match rate is very, very high. It's upwards of 95% because we do all of that work on the back end to bring those employers onto the platform. Josh, there were several questions within that question. Did I hit on everything, or did I miss something there?
No, I think that was great. And maybe I'll just add a couple of things to that. I will say as well that we are very eyes wide open with our partners about where we can help them be successful. If we have somebody coming to us that's looking for, soil science projects, we're probably going to steer them away from doing that on Ripen because we're probably not going to be able to deliver if that's what they're looking for. So that really begins with the creation of those experience pages that Anna Bradley was showing you, where we work very closely with our partners to create those, to articulate what they're looking for, to make sure that we are setting good expectations for the kinds of projects that we can help them find. And then ultimately the success is very, very high in helping our partners to find projects that are well aligned for what they're looking to do. And that best practice, as Anna Bradley said, is a good 6 to 8 weeks in advance of when projects need to be ready to go for learners. That's when we want to get those experience pages published on our platform, so that there is then time to do some marketing if we need to interact with companies, to go through that matching process. One thing I'll add, because there was a question relating to this, we're seeing a lot of different models and practice for how our partners are working with Ripen and what the intersections are between Ripen and faculty. We have some partners where faculty work directly on Ripen. We help train them. We help get them set up and get their experience page published. We send them some recommendations for projects. But they're really doing the bulk of then reviewing those projects, interacting with companies and selecting those projects. There are some faculty that have the time and the interest to do that. There are many other faculty who may be interested to do project-based learning, to change their class to incorporate projects, but don't have the time to spend to interact with companies and get those matches lined up. In those cases, we have many partners that are starting to have, or that have for some time, depending on the school, offices of whether they be experiential learning offices or the Career Center working with faculty, but someone whose job it is to help faculty to do that, who we then are able to train and make more impactful in the work they're doing by finding more companies more quickly, giving them tools to really oversee large numbers of those kinds of communications at once, and then be the bridge between the faculty and the company. And there are then other cases where Ripen actually provides that support on behalf of our partners. Actually, the example that Anna Bradley showed for the collaboration tools, the digital tech projects at the University of Virginia, that was actually a co-curricular program. So there was no faculty component there. What they actually offered to learners in that program was the opportunity to do a Google certificate during the recently completed J term. And then after they finish that Google certificate, to then do a project applying what they just learned, which I think is a really interesting use case that I can see being replicated both at UVA, but also among many of our other partners, offering some kind of a non-credit certificate program with an opportunity then to apply what you've learned. Makes tons of sense. But in that particular case, they didn't have someone, a faculty member or otherwise, because that was a brand new offering using Google certificates, to do that matching and to oversee those collaborations. And so in those cases, Ripen actually did that on their behalf. So that whole range of opportunities exists in terms of, who is providing that level of support. What support are we then in turn providing them by way of training or direct support? All of those are things that, we're happy to discuss with our partners to ultimately help them be successful. And I think that's probably a great segue into a couple of questions about cost. There are a few questions that folks asked about just what does this cost? The answer really is it depends on how you're using Ripen. How many experiences are you running? how many projects do you need to be able to accommodate those experiences, and what kinds of support do you need from Riipen to make that successful? So that range of support options that I just described have obvious cost implications. I will say that we typically get started with an institution where we look at doing, roughly 5 experiences in the first year, let's say. Could be more, could be a few less. And those are going to be with often early adopting faculty where we're going to do sort of train the trainer and provide some support where needed. And that sort of a starting point is often where we get started. And then we grow that as we're demonstrating impact from those initial set of courses over several years. So that sort of an approach. Often we get started in the neighborhood of between $20,000 and $30,000 in the first year. But at the end of the day, it depends on how you're using Riipen, and we're happy to have those conversations around the specifics that you are interested in. But there was somebody in particular that said it's budgeting season. We're interested in a ballpark. So there's your ballpark. Let's see here. Let me see what other questions we can answer in the last few minutes we have left. There is another question about the kinds of companies. We alluded to that before, but somebody asking about government, nonprofit, those kinds of organizations. I think what is most common about organizations on Riipen, I said this a little bit earlier, is that they are small and medium sized. So that means we do have a lot of nonprofits on Riipen. I think there are some governmental organizations as well, probably not a huge number of those, but a lot of nonprofits for sure, and then all sorts of different industries and verticals. But small and medium size is what describes them most commonly. There's one other sort of theme here that's sprinkled in a couple of these questions, and maybe I'll pivot this one back to you, Anna Bradley, to answer in the minute or two we have left. And that's around either institutions themselves sponsoring projects and or projects coming out of their own network. So I know we only briefly alluded to the private marketplace, but do you want to take about a minute and a half to just describe a little bit more what the private marketplace is all about?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad there are folks asking about this because we didn't touch on it since we did such a high overview. But one of the neat things about Riipen is we know that you and your faculty and educators have a local or regional industry partners that you know and love and who know and love you, and you want to continue to work with them. The cool thing about Riipen is we've got this feature called the private marketplace where you can invite those folks onto Riipen to collaborate with your students and your faculty and your program coordinators, as well as use Riipen to then backfill projects and experience you need that maybe your local partners are not able to help you to do. So you still get to use the Riipen program management tools and impact assessment tools and reporting data all in one place. You can almost the best of both worlds. You can harness your current partners, and you can also find new partners as well via the Riipen open marketplace.
And one thing I'll add to that is one of the things that we've really invested a lot of time in developing Riipen are tools to make developing these project scopes easier and better. So at the end of the day, that too is a barrier. You might approach a local business and say, would you be interested in doing a project with my students? And they might say, yeah, that sounds great. I could use help with, this, that, and the other thing. But then turning this, that, or the other thing into a project scope with deliverables and clear objectives, that's the hard part. And so we didn't show this at all today, but we have really leveraged AI to help do that, for example. Whereas an organization, I just type in a 1 or 2 sentence goal for my project, and leveraging generative AI, it builds out a lot of detail around the objectives, the specific deliverables, the tasks to be completed to help making, that whole process of intake easier. And that's true both of companies that you would invite to participate in your private marketplace. That's one of the value props there is you position that opportunity to local organizations, and it's easier for them to engage, as well as companies that are signing up on Riipen at large. So we are just about at time. We've covered a lot of material today, not nearly everything that we could have covered. And so to that end, we're happy to connect and follow up with anybody individually to show you some more specific examples, talk about your use cases, talk about cost, all those kinds of things. So please get in touch with us. The link to our request information form was shared in the chat, and we will be sharing this recording in follow-up as well. So greatly appreciate all of your time here today. Hope this was an informative session for you. Thank you, Anna Bradley, for joining me here today, and we will look forward to following up and connecting with all of you in the future. Everybody have a great afternoon.
Thanks all.